Welcome to Beyond Tech, where innovation meets insight.
We're your hosts, Jackie Slatt and Jennifer Palumbo. Today, we're diving into one of the most rapidly evolving corners of the technology world, data centers. As AI, cloud computing, and high density workloads surge, operators are under more pressure to deliver greater speed, scalability, and sustainability than ever before. Modernizing infrastructure, improving energy efficiency, and protecting uptime aren't optional, they're essential.
In this episode, we're joined by two experts from eTech Group, Bryan Sharp, Vice President of Mission Critical, and Cam Rogers, our Senior Director of Business Development, to explore how automation, predictive maintenance, and intelligent infrastructure are reshaping performance and resilience in mission-critical environments. Bryan, Cam, thanks so much for joining us today.
Glad to be here.
Joining us.
I'm so glad that we finally got to get together. We've attempted a few times to record this episode and it just hasn't worked out. So just a couple of months into 2026, and it's very clear that the data center industry is continuing to grow rapidly. Can you help us unpack what is driving that growth and where do you guys see the industry going in the next few years?
Well, the data center industry has been growing for a long time, over 10 years. Maybe you could argue to say over 15 years. But in the last couple of years, when AI started to being used more and more, it impacted everything. The up and to the right line turned into a hockey stick. So everything got accelerated because AI requires more computing power, more cooling, redesign of data centers, and it's a lot of work. So there's even more construction in data centers happening now than there has been ever. And I think it's going to continue to grow.
Are there any trends that you're seeing in the last few years that are really driving growth and just maybe change in the way that data centers are being built, being operated?
Well, a lot of it has to do with the size of the racks, how many kilowatts it takes, and also how much heat the racks generate now. It's been increasing over the years. So every time that happens, that means you need more power, you need more cooling capacity, which changes the design of the data center, how much cooling capacity you need, how much power you need, the availability of that power in different parts of the country. So that's changed the map a little bit on where things are being built and so forth.
Makes sense.
When you say cooling technology, can you explain to someone who is not in data centers what that looks like? Because I'm picturing a dunk tank.
Well, it used to be that air, cooling the data center, the data halls where the servers are, where all the heat's generated, was done by air cooling. But because of the amount of heat generated, that hasn't been enough. And now they've gone into liquid cooling. And some of that liquid cooling is direct to the chip. And if it gets hotter, and as it gets hotter and hotter, there's different methods of doing that. And then you can get to the point where you're actually immersing the servers in a liquid that doesn't conduct electricity, but you're actually immersing the entire server into a tank. But that's for really high capacity racks with lots of heat generated.
You think things like AI, is that what's driving that need for differentiated cooling?
Yeah, absolutely. The chips they burn hotter and they generate more heat. And on top of that, there's just more capacity needed because of the continued expanded use of AI and everything that a data center does.
Yeah. What other things are you seeing? I mean, AI, obviously, everybody's utilizing it. We know how much energy it is consuming. What are you seeing in the way that that is influencing infrastructure and automation strategies for these data centers?
I think I can jump in on that. I think the biggest thing we're seeing is that it's resulting in larger buildings and larger campuses.
Yeah.
Just because of the amount of compute required within a site. A 40 megawatt building used to be a big data center. And now that's actually becoming kind of a small data center. And we're seeing data centers anywhere from 100 to 200 to even 400 megawatt underneath a single roof. With that, what we're also seeing as far as the impacts it's having would be the density within that building. Whereas before, you were looking at what would have been maybe 8 to 10 kilowatts to a rack. And that was back in the day. I've been, 24 years ago when I was selling monitoring systems to data centers, there were talks that, well, someday we're going to get up to 16 or 20 or maybe even 25 kilowatt to a rack someday. And everyone's shaking their head saying, no way, that's not going to happen. Well, the reality is now, 50 to 100 kilowatt to a rack is becoming commonplace with some of the new chips and some of the new GPUs that are out there. Now we're looking at 300, even 400. And recently at the NVIDIA GTC conference, they were actually showcasing racks that had over basically a megawatt right to the rack itself, which now all of a sudden, the amount of cooling that's required to get that kind of manage those chips and keep those chips cool, it's a whole new strategy as far as how to manage it, how to keep that cool. What we're seeing now is that these sites have to be built out, whereas an old site that might have been a greenfield site, the existing site, it's not really quick and easy to retrofit an old building with these new technologies. So now what's happening is we're actually seeing, these larger campuses that are coming into play, requiring an extreme amount of power and even cooling. One thing that I think that's kind of interesting that I've been hearing a lot about, and there was actually talk of it at a DCD conference. A lot of people are concerned about all the data centers, and I might be going on a tangent here, what the impacts are, and there's the different areas that are starting to as far as really push back on data center builds. And I think at the DCD conference, it kind of came to light when one of the speakers was talking that there's some Girl Scouts out there actually picketing against data centers. And didn't quite, I would have loved to ask the question, well, are you ever on social media? Are you ever on, watching movies on Netflix? Are you ever, I mean, there's so much required, and people don't quite understand that with the power that we're seeing today and the cooling that we're seeing, it's not having that impact that, I think a lot of people think that it's having. And I think that's just a matter of public awareness, what impact it actually truly is having there.
Well,
Um,
that
you know,
makes sense. And as a former Girl Scout myself, I'm very proud of them for exercising their First Amendment right, which I think is fantastic. But you bring up a good point. I mean, I think, and I'll keep going down the tangent because I like to do it. But I think the concern on the effects around the environment, the energy usage, but a lot of the work that goes into the automation and the design of the buildings is meant to mitigate some of those concerns, right, about energy usage. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
But I think the biggest thing that we're seeing trending as far as when you're looking at the energy side of things, certainly there are grid restraints that are impacting what available power is, and that's actually driving where builds are even delaying builds that we're seeing. But now we're looking at other alternatives. We have stranded natural gas, for example, and we're seeing more sites that, as opposed to utilizing utility power, they're utilizing the actual natural gas within the area and doing on-site power generation. We're looking at other means. We might be as far as small modular reactors, or utilizing more nuclear reactors to help power these sites as well. So there are a lot of other options that are out there. And the requirements, when you're looking at a data center today in a large campus, that I've heard reports is a single campus could be requiring more power than the entire island of Manhattan is consuming. And when you look at that kind of power requirements, we need to be looking at alternatives and what we're going to be able to do to manage that and continue to power so we can continue to build these sites.
Yeah, and I was going to say what we're seeing, Kim touched on some of this. What we're seeing before the data centers are even built is you have to acquire the land, you have to talk to the community, answer their questions, and they're legitimate questions because you're building a large facility nearby, and they want to know, is there going to be a noise problem? Is there going to be a power problem? Is there going to be a water problem? Fortunately, the answer to most of those, or to all of those, is no, there's not. But the community deserves a response, and the data center community needs to be prepared to give them, some good answers, some logical answers, and stand behind them. It's one of the cleaner builds that you can do for the community. But of course, they have concerns, especially when you talk about power and water and all that kind of thing.
The biggest thing, a big thing that, data centers are really gauging that their metrics on are what's called PUE, or the basically power usage effectiveness. And closer they can get to a 1.0, which is a perfect, where, they're utilizing, as far as the power coming in, everything is going down to the servers as opposed
Mhm.
to loss within the site or in cooling or wherever it might be. Sites are looking to constantly improve that PUE as a metric against other data centers or against other builds, or just to see how efficient they are. So they're not blind to what they need to do on renewables and becoming more efficient. And they're tracking that. And I think a big part of it, like I say, it comes down to a misunderstanding. And I think the biggest thing that that hurdle that I think data center industry is facing right now is just public awareness and public education.
Yeah, it's a good point.
One thing you said there about PUE, the data centers are motivated to be as efficient as they can with the power because power costs money. So they're doing everything they can to be as efficient as possible, which I think helps everybody.
Yeah, to Cam's point, I highly doubt that anybody's going to be more motivated to put down TikTok or Instagram or stop streaming things. So we need to meet that growing demand. That's for sure.
But don't get me wrong. I'm not going to get into a debate with a Girl Scout over it.
You like the cookies too much. Those cookies are good.
Hey, just for the record, I've raised a Girl Scout too, and she's getting her gold award. So we've been through the whole.
We love to see it.
Like you touched on a little bit of the misconceptions about building a data center, but what are the misconceptions about the automation within a data center and how kind of people think they work?
When people look at as far as what AI is doing today, and, oh well, everybody's going to be losing their job. Nobody's going to have a job tomorrow because of AI. And the thing is, people are always going to be needed. It's just the shift in what that workload might look like. We're going to see a shift on exactly what those responsibilities might be. But when you start getting into, as far as the information that we're pulling together, and that we have that visibility to, what we're doing with that AI, even within data centers today, we're able to kind of take a look at and getting analytical on if we change this process and put this into place and maybe turn this off or turn this on, getting into more of a predictive analysis, a better understanding of exactly what's going on and how it's being handled. It also, with the automation, it gives a lot more visibility to that current and historical information. So now you can look at trends, you can see trends, see what happened over time, what impacts different changes had towards becoming more efficient in the big picture.
So I was going to talk a little bit more granular about that. I believe that data centers industry is still a relatively new industry. It's been around for a while, say 20, 25 years, something like, or maybe a little bit longer. But compared to other engineering and construction type work, like oil and gas and things like that, it's a relatively new industry. And understanding what the different components of engineering, design, and construction are, not everybody knows that yet. And there's a lot of new people in the industry. So we're still getting the misconception that doesn't take long to complete the automation controls portion of it. It's just a black box. You plug it in on one side and then on the other side, and it's all done. But it takes a lot of work to get it exactly right. The system integration and the controls portion of the data center is really the brains and the nervous system, or whatever you want to call it, for the data center. And it's pretty complicated, making sure everything is integrated the right way. So please, if there's any owners or general contractors listening, give us a little time. We'll do it as fast as we can and as efficiently as we can. But just, we all want to get it right, so we'd appreciate that.
I know you have, I think I've spoken with both of you about just the crazy percentage of uptime that all like the different tiers in data centers need to maintain. And so how, like critical it is that it's done right and can be monitored the way that it needs to be monitored.
Yeah. Yeah. So like we've talked about, we're mostly in tier 4 data centers, which means 99.99% uptime, which means you can be down about 30 minutes a year. And our clients and the owners, it's very important to them that we have the uptime, because they can get back charges if they're not providing the power and the cooling and the connectivity that they need to their clients. So that's why there's so much redundancy in the data centers, triple redundancy in many cases for power and instrumentation and everything. Yeah, it's a big deal.
I mean, it is like, again, very critical. I feel like anytime there is a outage, it becomes a like news story if Instagram's down for an hour or something. I mean, we all notice right away. And it is a part of everything that we do across a lot of industries.
Can I get my light back?
Yeah.
Well, to that end, I mean, it's certainly a challenge, and I would imagine there's heavy financial impacts to the clients and to their clients and to them. What are some other challenges that you see that owners and operators of these data centers have?
They're trying to decide what technology is best for them, and there's still conversations going on about DDC versus PLC. And in most cases, we recommend PLC because it's built for mission critical type projects. There's more redundancy and reliability in it. But some clients still want DDC, and that's okay too. We can do that as well. there's a lot of there nowadays there's a lot of established clients and data centers, but there's also some new up and comers who've had an influx of cash from investors or whatever, and they've decided that they want to get in the data center industry. So the responsibility of people like us, system integrators, is to explain all the different advantages and disadvantages of different types of technology, maybe where they want to build, and what type of software they want to use and everything. So we're doing more of that lately because there's a lot of new players coming in, and not just small players, people with good amount of backing cash wise, and they're building some big data centers.
So you would say like we're a good sort of partner to like kind of manage all of the complexities that they have in front of them, so they're making the
We're the
best
best
choices.
partner for that.
You you could call us the main automation partner if you just
You
We
want.
could
bet.
call
Well,
that.
But brownie points for marketing. Brown Girl Scouts? Anyone?
oh, it's coming for full circle.
All right. I can't promise that my bad jokes will stop there.
We love them.
Thank you.
So I've heard you guys talk about gigawatt data centers. How is the industry addressing the increased gigawatt power requirements for modern data centers?
Cam, you want to take that?
One area, and I touched on it earlier, SMRs. And I think that's going to be something when we look at small modular reactors or nuclear. When you look at it, doesn't get much greener than that. And again, I think that comes down to the education. Some of the restraints with that, though, are the costs. And when you're looking at the costs, potentially billions of dollars to put in a small modular reactor, at what point is that economical? But in the same breath, every day you're hearing about new campuses that are coming out that are $10 billion, $15 billion campuses. So at what point does a billion or 5 million, what's $1 billion between friends? It's when we're looking at, but certainly when the thing that you hear about renewables and people mention, well, what about solar, what about wind? And there was a figure that I heard once that really stuck with me, and that when you look at solar, for example, in order to power 1 megawatt, you need about 6 to 8 acres of panels. Well, take that by times that by 1,000 for a gigawatt site. So now you need 6 to 8,000 acres of panels just to power that site. And that's great when the sun's shining, but how are you going to keep that power going at night? Now you need some way to store all of that power for when the sun is not shining or for in the middle of the night. So it just doesn't become realistic. You're not going to look at 10,000 acres of land with solar panels on it just to be able to manage your data centers. That's where, another big push, as I mentioned earlier, looking at, for example, the untapped resources that we have where you have natural gas. And there are large pockets in Texas. And instead of having to run all the power infrastructure out to an area, you build these sites where that available resource is, and then you generate the power right there. And that's why we're starting to see more and more sites popping up in the middle of nowhere, because that is an option. And whether it's powering 100% or whether it's powering 50, or whether it's backup power, it is available resource that certainly can be tapped.
I think we covered the cooling. I don't know if you had any other things to add. I mean, we talked about it a little bit earlier on in the conversation, but are there any other emerging alternatives to cooling that you guys would want to discuss?
No, we talked about the ones we talked about the majority of them. There's some new stuff coming, but it's pretty really in the experimental phases right now. So I can't talk to that very much yet.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah, I feel like we covered a fair amount of it. Well, kind of switching gears here, then getting back to the operators and the engineers that are running these data center environments. What advice would you give them in terms of future proofing their data centers?
I like modularity. And when you're
Yeah.
looking at the modular approach, it solves a lot of issues. Whereas you have a typical building, and what they've been doing is they've been building out the power infrastructure, building out the racks, building out all the cooling in the building, ordering parts, and that's becoming a more of an issue too. Is the longer lead times. And with a modular approach, which we're starting to see more of, what you're able to do is build out the critical areas, whether it be a row of data center cabinets or power or cooling, and build that in facilities off-site. And then once you have your building in place, you can relocate those. So you can start building those out months and even
Yeah.
years in advance, have them ready to go. So once that building is in place, it's a matter of moving these kind of a modular approach over to the site. And it also plays well for retrofits down the road as technology changes, which it's going to continue to do. And right now we're looking at AC solutions. And if we start looking at DC solutions and move into like an 800 volt DC solution to the rack, well, that's going to create major impact on the infrastructure of existing buildings. Whereas with a modular approach, you can pull that section out and put in the new without having to do a forklift overhaul.
Yeah, Cam touched on modularity helping your schedule because you can do a lot of stuff in parallel. You don't have to wait for something else to happen while you're building your module. But it also helps a couple other problems. It helps, there's a resource problem or a manpower problem. If you're building a data center or a remote location or wherever you're building it, in a lot of cases, there's a shortage of resources, electricians, technicians, and that type of thing. So if you have an established skid manufacturer, module fabricator, you can, you already have your resources there. They drive to work the same time, same place every day, and you have a controlled environment that if you have a big enough shop, you can be building these on the inside, so you don't have to worry about weather, temperature, all that kind of thing. It's controlled environments. Normally, your quality is better. Your only challenge is getting those modules or those skids to the field without, doing any damage or, inevitably it's going to shake around a little bit. So you have to tighten some things up and test things once it gets there. But like I said before, other industries in more established industries, they've been using modules and skids for a long time. So it's nice to see the data center industry thinking about that and all the advantages that it has.
Nice.
One of the other, I guess, benefits maybe would be is for modularity, it would be additional space for expansion. Is that something that they could, I guess, can you expand onto a data center or do they really need to like go to a new location?
You can if you've planned for additional
Space.
space when you start it. And like your all's original question was, how do they future proof their data center? Allow room for expansion. Yeah, allow room to add extra modules and
Good
change
point.
your data halls to adapt to new technology or cooling requirements or whatever you need as much as you can. I mean, there's a cutoff point there at some time. You can still plan for expansion and not spend a lot of extra money.
Well, it used to be that you'd build out basically the building and then you'd have white space. And as you find customers, you'd build out that white space and you'd build out that, as far as the hot aisles and the cold aisles and basically add in all your racks and equipment. And the thing is, today, the scale that things are getting built, there is no white space. So what you need to do in looking at that approach, as far as that expansion, it does allow if you have the building there and the power available to continue to build out with a modular approach as far as just adding new components, and it can be done very quick.
I don't think we even talked about the scale of these facilities. Like what's the average size that you guys are seeing these days?
Big.
50 and 100 megawatt buildings. Sometimes those can be like 1 million square feet per building, but that's just one building.
That's one building.
Now, it's happened in the past, but it's magnified lately, is that there's a lot more buildings in a campus. You may have 5 buildings, 10 buildings, 15 buildings in a campus. And some of these AI facilities are as large, no exaggeration, they're as large as the borough of Manhattan. So you're going 5 miles one direction, 1 mile another direction, something like that. And if you're from Manhattan and know the exact dimensions, I'm sorry, I don't know what they are, but but they're very large, taking up a lot of land and giving a lot of people some work to do for, you know, one building. If you're building one building at a time, you could be working on that data center for 5, 6, 7 years.
We got one campus it's a 5 mile by 7 mile plot of land. So you're looking at 35 square miles for a data center campus.
Wow, that's insane.
Yeah, I'm trying to like picture that my whole drive to downtown Cincinnati. I don't, like that's crazy. Okay, I don't have any other like industry type questions. Do you have any, Jen, before we move on to the fun closing questions?
No, I think we've gotten a lot of really good info out of these guys. I guess, is there anything that we didn't discuss that is top of mind for you right now that we should share?
Like Jackie said something about getting the idea of the size. So if you look at, this is an example I use sometimes. If you look at a building, one data center building, not a campus, just one building, If you took about 6 super Walmarts and put them right next to each other, end on end, and then you put a second layer on top of that and a third layer on top of that, that's how big one building is.
You'd be in Walmart forever.
Yeah, just lost forever inside Walmart.
And obviously, there's different size buildings, but a lot of them are about that big.
It's crazy.
I'm feeling like they need to put like a public transportation system in the data centers, but that's
But yeah, they
probably
do.
not needed.
There's a lot of scooters and buggies, actually, to get around.
I can imagine.
Well, that's it's kind of fun. I feel like my marketing brain is like, let's get a horse-drawn carriage. But that is
Jeez.
probably not going to serve any purpose. But anyway, I do want to thank you guys for taking some time to discuss everything we've discussed about data centers, Girl Scouts, all the things. But I like to wrap up these episodes with some fun questions to help us learn a little bit more about you and our audience. What is one thing you've learned the hard way in your career?
And make sure your microphone's on or off in the meeting when it's supposed to be.
Sage advice.
Put your dogs outside before you start a podcast.
We love dogs though on this podcast.
I was going to say that was the alternative name, Beyond Tech or We Love Dogs.
Yeah, one big one that I've learned is that obviously a lot of these meetings and as far as Teams meetings and whatnot, you might have AI notes running in the background. And just remember to exit the meeting when people leave the meeting. Don't continue your conversations. Leave the
Yeah.
meeting and pick them up elsewhere.
Yeah.
Don't let AI take those notes.
Yeah, you don't need to note everything, right?
I have a question. What's your favorite Girl Scout cookie?
I like Thin Mints,
Yes.
not my
in the freezer.
favorite. Pretty good. Don't
I
like
like
the peanut
Samoas.
butter. The limit,
Samoas.
yeah, Samoas. Yeah, I'd say Samoas. That's the one with the coconuts, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Always good. What about you, Jackie?
I do not like Samoas because I think coconut tastes like sunscreen. So
You're
I'm
eating
a
too much
Thin Mints.
sunscreen.
I don't know, but that is what in my head when I smell it, I'm like, this is sunscreen. We're just eating sunscreen.
So they have a lemon flavor. What do you guys call the lemon flavor? Lemon snaps or something like that.
I thought they were like, they're not tagalongs. That's something different. No, that's the
Tagalon's the chocolate peanut butter.
trefoils. Yeah. Oh,
So,
dang. I'm a
Did
terrible
you
girl.
know that the flavor of the lemon cookies or any of these cookies are different depending on what region of the country you go to, because you have different distributors of those cookies. So different companies make the cookies depending on what region of the country you're in.
Now,
think
I am
it's
right on the border of the Dayton bakery and the one in Northern Kentucky. So depending on
So
who you buy
can-
your Girl Scout cookies from, you get different options. And so I did know that, but
Yeah, you experience.
and this is important information.
It is very important.
I hope AI is taking notes. So if you could automate one thing in your life, what would it be?
I'll go with
We've got-
laundry. I want to throw my clothes in a hamper and then turn around and it's hanging on the hanger.
I always get my kids to help me. They're getting a little old now to do that, but help me put up and take down the Christmas lights. And you can get pretty ambitious depending on what you want to do with these Christmas lights. So I'm sure they would say it would be nice if AI could do that for them.
Now, you should listen to our last podcast episode where Chris Schleich is talking about his automated Christmas lights. And if you
Pretty
want
cool.
to ask him about it, he can tell you how to automate it.
But are they putting themselves up and taking themselves
don't
down?
I think they are doing that, but they are going to music. So
Yeah, actually, Sandy has some of those installed at her house, and they're called jelly lights or something like that. And it's there's an app on your phone you can change the colors depending on the season. And the way they install them is where they're not real visible when you're just looking at them during the day. You don't really notice they're there. So maybe that problem's already been solved.
all right, this is still always and forever will be one of my favorite questions is how would you describe your job to a 5-year-old?
I tell them we keep the internet cold, or we keep you hear everybody talking about the cloud, right? Well, the cloud is where all your games and everything that you play on the PlayStation or Xbox or whatever now on phones. Well, that all comes from the cloud or the internet. If the cloud gets too warm, none of that works. So we keep the cloud cold. So everything you use every day on your phone or your iPad or your game system or whatever is always working all the time.
It's a good one. I always think of the Zoolander clip where they're like, the files are in the computer. And then they start like beating the computer up to get the files out. Anyway, that is probably not relevant to
It is
dating,
a classic film, though.
but it is
Yes,
just
it is.
constantly in my brain.
Completely right.
So my final question is, what would you like to see us cover on future episodes of Beyond Tech?
I'll go with how to avoid getting pulled into podcasts.
It's too late.
No.
You're here.
But don't get me wrong. No, this has been great. This has been fun.
I don't have anything to add to that.
Be listening for that episode, I see. But we do appreciate you guys taking some time and talking with us. I think this was fun. Hopefully, we'll get you in for another one, I'm sure.
Thanks again for your time today. It was great to chat with you.
That was great chatting with you.
And one last thing before we go. eTech Group is growing, and it's an exciting time to be here. If you're looking for challenging work, great people, and the chance to be part of a company that's clearly building for the future, we love to connect. Visit etechgroup.com/careers to see our open roles.